Überdenken. Yes, 2 years later, it's still true. The next How to Train Your Dragon is coming, and as I said before, the ending of Hickman Tullis' How to Train Your Dragon story has come, but the true beginning is still to come. And yes, as said before, the next How to Train Your Dragon will be a prequel. For those doubting, this first part is for you. For the rest, the updated expected plot is just after, along with all the discoveries since my last video. The most clear evidence given by the primary director and writer of the entire How to Train Your Dragon movie series, Dean DeBlois, is in an interview saying how he was inspired by films like Star Wars and wanted to make his own masterpiece franchise. For those that don't know, Star Wars A New Hope Episode 4 was just called Star Wars when it was initially released, and was set to be a trilogy. Its writer George Lucas had it in his mind that he wanted to build a fan base off Episode 4, the first Star Wars, and then after a solid trilogy, he would make another prequel trilogy telling the story of the building of the Empire. Once he had his fan base, he did just that, which commenced the renaming of all Star Wars movies at the time. Just like how to Train Your Dragon The Hidden World wasn't called How to Train Your Dragon 3 in preparation for this rebranding. Adding to the proof is contrary to what I've seen repeatedly in the comments. Even if Dean decided to stick to his guns and never work on How to Train Your Dragon related projects again, the new owners of DreamWorks, Comcast, they specifically bought DreamWorks, and I almost exactly quote, to milk the existing franchises. Comcast is not going to throw away $3.8 billion because Dean said to. Frankly, he's not the only director and writer capable of making these masterpieces, and the voice crew have already shown no allegiance to him. Proof being raised to the edge. Up till now, Comcast has been testing the public reputation waters with throwaway franchises like The Croods. That sequel was cancelled twice before being restarted again for Comcast to see what they could do with DreamWorks and how people would view them after. Once Comcast feels comfortable, they will begin the true milking. Shrek, Kung Fu Panda, and How to Train Your Dragon. Shrek is already in the works, projected for a release in 2021 or 2022. Therefore, 2023 or 2024 would be highly likely How to Train Your Dragon time. If Dean wants to secure the image of his legacy, he'll want to make sure he's the one writing that movie, or those movies, and just maybe even a show, which should satisfy you dragon writing fans. More on that later. Continuing hints have been carefully placed and carefully cut from the existing trilogy, its trailers and so on. The hints all point to a prequel showcasing Stoic and Valka's coming-of-age story and Hiccup's childhood. Hints such as the fact that the How to Train Your Dragon 3 trailer had fully rendered scenes that weren't used in any How to Train Your Dragon film, and the fact that animation to this spec is $1.5 million per minute on average, so it's unlikely those were just for a trailer. Additionally, Stoic in the trailer of How to Train Your Dragon The Hidden World says,
"And I believe it's your destiny to one day find this hidden world."
But in the actual movie, he says,
"One day I'll find the hidden world and seal it up."
Dean would not have done that on accident. Not to mention there's this scene. Valka hints at her adolescence, cut possibly to save material for the prequels. Further plot points can be found around like the following. Grimmo states that he knew Stoic, and my guess is that he knew Gobber too based on this little reaction Grimmo gives to Gobber's line, like reviving an old memory of former allies. With how much How to Train Your Dragon 2 and the Hidden World flashbacks to the past, it seems as though a theme is trying to be set. These were fully planned, modeled, and rendered scenes. This idea indicates that much of Stoic and Valka's parents' past, along with their childhoods, will be flashback to. An additional cutscene here, from How to Train Your Dragon The Hidden World, shows young Hiccup wanting to nurse an injured bird back to health. Considering that it was cut, and that Hiccup followed after Valka, I believe this scene is being reserved as background material for Valka's past, her growing with a more compassionate outlook than the world she grew up in. As for Stoic's difficult connection with his father, here's a line cut from the original movie.
The note we got from Jeffrey Katzenberg on, I love this one. The line is, "You are my strength, you always were," from Stoic. It says, "Nice ending, just missing the story that gets us here."
This line is too good of a line to waste. I think Dean may be reserving it for either Stoic to say to Hiccup in this prequel, or more likely for Stoic's father to say it to him when he passes, or maybe even both. The way Stoic's father passes leads to a darker, but also a good explanation for Valka's seemable irrational fear of harming Stoic, and Hiccup with her actions. This being an update to my last video's theory. Based on what Stoic says about Valka in How to Train Your Dragon 2 and what How to Train Your Dragon 3's deleted scene has her say, she was a free spirit. Her being so separated from Berk's citizens, her outlook made her quite the explorer, and one that would have to do so in a secretive way. Stoic wanting as a teenager to escape his father's expectations and control, this is likely one of the main reasons for his connection with Valka. But after coming to care about her opinion and adjusting his own accordingly, his love for her and trust from them working so well as a pair, I believe caused a great loss for himself. What I mean by that is, him being relied upon by his father, I believe whether it be by a dragon or by enemy tribes, Stoic's father came to rely upon Stoic to act in a way that Stoic became unwilling to do. This unfortunately resulting in Stoic's father's death. This would leave a believable fear in Valka's outlook and invigorate a new level of hatred towards dragons and Stoic, undoing any influence she may have had. Dawning the age of the alliance with Grimmel's tribe and other tribes looking to solve the dragon scourge that the archipelago faced at the time. This would lead Stoic to listening to every tall tale, Stoic acting as chief with the worried but nonetheless persistent and supportive Valka, leading to the search for the hidden world. But after years of searching with no hope, Stoic is invited to the great gathering among chieftains to finally solve the scourge, as shown in How to Train Your Dragon 2. This leading to the death of those villages' chiefs. Stoic suspiciously being the only one to have survived this meeting, that would make Berk have all sorts of new enemies. In return, Berk would be forced out of the weaponry midst. Hence why Berk's weapons were so different from everyone else's. Not to mention having these new enemies means losing ties and therefore communication with Grimmel's eastern tribe and Drago's southern tribe and the like. This would put a new setback on the hidden world search, so after some time, Stoic had to invigorate a will to find the hidden world in the next generation, including his own son as shown in the trailer. Valka having had been taken from Berk and very likely having had been trying to save as many dragons as she could, in the sneaky way she had learned in her youth, quite possibly saving Toothless on her way, placing him in the only place she knew Grimmel wouldn't be able to go and the only place that wouldn't be able to kill such a creature, Berk. Which evidence of this is the fact that she tells Hiccup in How to Train Your Dragon 2 that him and Toothless are the same age, from seemingly no evidence. Stoic then seeing a Night Fury blasting through Berk, leaded Stoic to believe that Grimmel's claim of killing all Night Furies to be nothing but another Viking myth, which then led to the records of Grimmel's stories not being left in the Dragon Manual, and on begins How to Train Your Dragon 1. So yes, How to Train Your Dragon's prequel is coming, but for those of you dragon riding lovers, what's the hope for you? Thanks to your generous comments and some hefty searching by me, the answer seems clear. Hints like there being an extra Bewilderbeast from Race to the Edge means that there's enough material for another show or another season. Proof of that fact is that Drago's Bewilderbeast was in the Berserker Beast. Rest in peace Draugr and Mala, and likely the Winged Maidens who would have been killed for that dragon. Then there's also the fact that the egg given to Valka at the end of the show is impossibly young and too small to have been her Bewilderbeast. This all means that there's still a young, possibly unborn Bewilderbeast needing protection by the end of How to Train Your Dragon 2. And back in How to Train Your Dragon 2, Valka mentioned how Cloudjumper must have thought that she belonged in the Ice Cave, in the home of the great Bewilderbeast. This further proves that her Bewilderbeast is at least older than Hiccup. This new problem could be resolved in a show placed in the time between How to Train Your Dragon 2 and 3, which the new owners Comcast wanting to milk How to Train Your Dragon means that this show is extremely likely to become real. This is further proven by Dean DeVloy in an interview, saying that while he has no intention of making sequels, spin-offs aren't off the table, and no, that does not just mean getting Homecoming. There's still more money to be made. So yes, a show on the table. This could then be used to further the story for Hiccup and Astrid's kids, similar to what happened with Star Wars with Disney, meaning just maybe a true sequel could come. By then, maybe even made by you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all the continued support over the years. If you'd like to see more from me, please say what you'd like me to work on next, and as always, over and out. Finally.